Emma Rodriguez pressed her back against the cool marble wall of the grand ballroom, watching the glittering crowd of New York's elites swirl around her like she was nothing more than furniture. The charity gala for the Metropolitan Arts Foundation was in full swing, and she had never felt more out of place in her entire 28 years of life. She tugged at the hem of her simple, black dress, a clearance rack find from 3 seasons ago that suddenly felt painfully inadequate among the designer gowns that probably cost more than her monthly salary as a museum curator. Her thick-rimmed glasses kept sliding down her nose, and she pushed them up for the 100th time that evening, a nervous habit that made her feel even more invisible. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days surrounded by priceless art and artifacts, able to speak passionately about Renaissance painters and ancient civilizations, yet here among actual people, she felt like a ghost. She had been working at the small Riverside Cultural Museum for 5 years, pouring her heart into creating exhibitions that maybe 50 people would see on a busy day. Emma, darling, there you are. The voice belonged to Victoria Ashford, the museum's board chairwoman, who approached with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. I've been looking everywhere for you. There are some potential donors I'd like you to meet. Emma straightened up, forcing what she hoped was a confident smile. This was why she was here, after all. The Riverside Cultural Museum was struggling financially, and tonight was supposed to be about networking, about finding people who might care enough to help keep their doors open. Victoria led her to a group of well-dressed men and women holding champagne flutes, all looking perfectly comfortable in this world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Emma Rodriguez, our head curator at Riverside Cultural Museum. She's absolutely brilliant with historical artifacts. The group turned toward her with polite interest that felt as thin as tissue paper. Emma began her well-rehearsed pitch about the museum's mission, about preserving local history and making art accessible to underserved communities. She watched their eyes glaze over one by one, saw them begin to look past her toward more interesting conversations. How charming, said a woman in pearls that probably cost more than Emma's car. It must be so fulfilling to work with old things. The dismissive tone made Emma's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Within minutes, the group had dispersed, leaving Emma standing alone again with Victoria, who was already scanning the room for her next networking opportunity. Well, that didn't go quite as planned, Victoria said with a sigh. Perhaps you should work on your presentation skills, dear. These people need to feel excited about giving money, not lectured about historical significance. Emma nodded numbly, fighting back tears of frustration. She excused herself and made her way toward the ladies' room, needing a moment to compose herself. The hallway was blissfully quiet compared to the ballroom, lined with photographs of previous charity events featuring smiling donors and grateful recipients. She was studying one of the photos when she heard footsteps approaching. Without looking up, she said, "The ladies' room is just down the hall if you're looking for it, actually. I was looking for you." The voice was warm and slightly amused, definitely masculine. Emma turned around and found herself face to face with a tall man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. He had dark hair that was perfectly styled, yet somehow looked touchable, and green eyes that seemed to actually see her in a way that made her feel suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Emma asked, unconsciously pushing her glasses up again. "Not yet, but I hope to change that. I'm James Harrison." He extended his hand, and when she shook it, his grip was warm and firm. "I couldn't help but overhear your presentation about the Riverside Cultural Museum. I found it fascinating." Emma blinked in surprise. "You did?" "Absolutely. The way you talked about making history accessible to everyone, about being a bridge between the past and present, it was inspiring. Most people in there are talking about tax write-offs and social status. You were talking about actually making a difference." For a moment, Emma wondered if this was some kind of elaborate joke. Men who looked like James Harrison, who carried themselves with that kind of quiet confidence, didn't usually seek out conversations with women like her. But there was something genuine in his expression, an intensity in the way he listened that made her believe he was serious. "Thank you," she said softly, "though I'm not sure everyone shared your enthusiasm." "Their loss?" James said simply. Tell me more about your museum. What kind of challenges are you facing? Something about his direct question and the way he waited for her answer made Emma find her voice. She told him about their funding struggles, about having to choose between keeping the lights on and acquiring new pieces for their collection. She explained how they served a community that had been overlooked by larger institutions, how they provided educational programs for local schools that couldn't afford field trips to the big museums in Manhattan. James listened without interrupting, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely engaged. For the first time all evening, Emma felt like she was having a real conversation, not just delivering a rehearsed pitch to people who were already looking for ways to escape. You know, James said when she finished, I've been to dozens of these events, and I've never heard anyone speak with such passion about their work. Most people here tonight are going through the motions, saying what they think donors want to hear. But you actually care. Emma felt a flush of warmth at his words. Sometimes I think I care too much. It would probably be easier if I could just see it as a job instead of a calling. The world needs more people who care too much, James said. Trust me. I know what it looks like when people stop caring about anything beyond their own interests. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, a hint of loneliness that surprised her. Before she could ask what he meant, Victoria appeared around the corner, her eyes lighting up when she saw James. Mr. Harrison, there you are. I've been hoping to introduce you to some of our key supporters. Victoria's entire demeanor had transformed from the slightly condescending tone she'd used with Emma to something approaching reverence. Actually, Ms. Rodriguez and I were having a fascinating discussion about her museum, James said smoothly. I'd love to continue our conversation. Perhaps we could arrange a proper meeting sometime this week. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. You want to visit the museum? Very much. Would Thursday afternoon work for you? She nodded, probably more eagerly than was professional, but she couldn't help herself. As Victoria led James back toward the main party, he turned back to Emma with a smile that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible after all, standing alone in the hallway again. Emma touched her face where she could still feel the warmth of his attention. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Thursday afternoon arrived with nervous energy that Emma could barely contain. She had spent the morning arranging and rearranging displays at the Riverside Cultural Museum, checking every detail twice, and changing her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple navy dress that made her feel professional yet approachable. When James Harrison walked through the entrance at exactly 2 o'clock, he looked different from the polished businessman she had met at the gala. Today he wore casual khakis and a white button-down shirt, carrying a leather notebook and wearing an expression of genuine curiosity as he took in the modest but carefully curated space. Welcome to our little corner of history, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. James paused at the first display case, which contained artifacts from the neighborhood's founding families. These pieces are incredible. This ceramic bowl, it's not just decoration, is it? Emma felt her excitement bubble up. No, it was used for family meals by the Martinez family, who settled here in 1892. They brought it from Mexico. It was passed down through 4 generations before being donated to us. When you hold something like that, you're touching the same surface that fed children. That was present at celebrations and difficult times, as she guided him through the museum. Emma found herself speaking with increasing passion. James listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about their community outreach programs, their partnerships with local schools, and their efforts to preserve oral histories from elderly neighborhood residents. This exhibition about the textile workers is powerful, James said. Stopping in front of a display featuring photographs, tools, and personal letters from the 1920s, you can feel their struggles and their hopes. That's exactly what we want, Emma replied. History isn't just dates and facts. It's human stories that connect us to something larger than ourselves. When they reached her small office at the back of the museum, Emma gestured for James to take a seat while she poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot she always kept brewing. I have to ask, James said. settling into the chair across from her desk. "How do you keep this place running? I can see how much you care, but caring doesn't pay the bills." Emma sighed, glancing at the stack of unpaid invoices and grant applications covering her desk. "Honestly, it's a constant struggle. We depend on small donations, a tiny city grant, and a lot of volunteer help. Some months, I'm not sure we'll make it to the next one." "What would change if money weren't the primary concern?" James asked. "If you could do anything you wanted with this place, what would it look like?" The question surprised Emma. She was so accustomed to thinking in terms of basic survival that she had almost forgotten how to dream big. But as she began to speak, her vision poured out with enthusiasm she didn't know she still possessed. "I would create hands-on learning spaces where children could experience history instead of just reading about it. Interactive exhibits where they could dress in period clothing, use replica tools, maybe even cook traditional foods from different eras. I'd expand our oral history project to record stories from every elderly person in the neighborhood before we lose those memories forever." James leaned forward, genuinely engaged. "What about technology? Digital preservation, virtual reality experiences?" "Oh, that would be amazing," Emma said, her eyes lighting up. "We have hundreds of documents and photographs in storage because we don't have display space. If we could digitize everything and create virtual tours, people around the world could explore our collection. And imagine virtual reality experiences where visitors could walk through the neighborhood as it looked indifferent." Decades. She realized she had been gesturing animatedly while talking, completely forgetting her usual self-consciousness. When she noticed James watching her with an expression of fascination and something else she couldn't quite identify, she felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sorry. I get carried away when I talk about this place." "Don't apologize," James said firmly. "That passion, that vision you just shared, it's extraordinary. Emma, I want to help make it happen." Emma blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I want to fund your expansion. Everything you just described, all of it." For several seconds, Emma couldn't speak. She stared at James, searching his face for signs that this was some kind of elaborate joke. "James, that would cost more money than this museum has seen in its entire existence." "I'm aware of that," he said calmly. "Emma, I've been successful in business, very successful. More successful than I probably deserve, but lately I've been wondering what the point of all that. Success is if it doesn't contribute to something meaningful." He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the busy street where children were walking home from school. "That night at the gala, listening to you talk about this place, was the first time in years that I felt genuinely excited about a project. Most of the conversations I have are about profit margins and market share. You're talking about preserving human stories and educating the next generation." Emma felt her understanding of this man shift dramatically. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" James turned back to her, and for a moment his carefully controlled expression softened. "Can I share something personal? I grew up about 10 blocks from here. My mother worked 2 jobs, and my grandmother would bring me to museums on weekends because they were free, and she believed I needed to learn about culture and history. Those visits changed my perspective on what was possible in life. I had no idea you had roots in this neighborhood. Most people assume I was born into privilege, and I don't usually correct them. It's easier than explaining that I understand exactly what these kids are going through." He paused. "I want to be part of something that might change a child's life, the way those museum visits changed mine." Over the next several weeks, Emma's quiet world transformed into a whirlwind of activity. James was not a distant benefactor who simply wrote checks. He was involved in every aspect of the planning, from reviewing architectural drawings to interviewing contractors to discussing the educational philosophy behind each new exhibit. Emma discovered that beneath his polished professional exterior, James was remarkably down-to-earth. He told self-deprecating stories about his early business failures that made her laugh until her sides hurt. He listened to her ideas with complete attention, asking questions that pushed her to think more deeply about her goals. One evening, as they worked late reviewing proposals for the digital archive system, Emma realized she had completely forgotten to feel intimidated by him. Somewhere between debating paint colors for the children's area and planning the layout for the expanded exhibition space, James had become simply her partner in bringing their shared vision to life. You know, she said, looking up from the budget spreadsheets covering her desk. 2 months ago, I never could have imagined any of this was possible. The renovation? James asked, glancing up from his laptop. All of it. Having someone believe in this place the way you do. Having my ideas taken seriously. Feeling like I might actually know what I'm doing. She paused, then added more quietly, feeling like my voice matters. James closed his laptop and gave her his complete attention. Emma, your voice has always mattered. You just needed people around you who were actually listening. The sincerity in his tone made her heart skip. She was beginning to realize that her feelings for James had evolved far beyond professional gratitude. Somewhere between late-night planning sessions and conversations about their hopes for the community, she had started falling for the man who saw potential in both her museum and in her James, she began. Not entirely sure what she wanted to say, he reached across the desk and gently took her hand. Emma, I need you to know that working with you on this project has become the highlight of my days. Your passion, your vision, the way you see possibility where others see problems, it's inspiring. Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from the contractor about tomorrow's meeting. But as she glanced at the message, she was acutely aware of James's hand still holding hers and the way he was looking at her. Like she was someone truly special. For the first time in her adult life, Emma Rodriguez felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 8 months later, Emma stood in the center of what had once been the small, struggling Riverside Cultural Museum and marveled at the transformation surrounding her. The space had tripled in size, with soaring ceilings, natural light streaming through carefully positioned windows, and interactive exhibits that buzzed with the energy of engaged visitors, children, moved excitedly through the hands-on discovery area, trying on replica clothing from different historical periods and using authentic tools under careful supervision. Their parents explored digital touchscreen displays that allowed them to dive deep into family histories and neighborhood stories that had been carefully preserved through the expanded oral history project, the crown jewel of the renovation was the community storytelling theater, where local residents shared their memories and experiences with audiences of neighbors and visitors. Today, Mrs. Patterson, who had lived in the neighborhood for 75 years, was telling a captivated group of teenagers about what the streets looked like during World War II. Are you ready for this? James appeared beside Emma, looking handsome in a charcoal suit that she now knew he had chosen because she had once mentioned she found the color distinguished. His presence still made her heart skip, but now it was accompanied by a deep sense of partnership and belonging. Emma smoothed her new dress, a confident red that would have felt too bold for the old version of herself. Over the past months, working alongside James and seeing her vision come to life, she had discovered a confidence she never knew she possessed. I think so, she said. Looking out at the crowd gathered for the museum's official grand reopening celebration, local families mingled with city officials, education professionals, and reporters who had come to document what was already being called a model for community-centered cultural preservation. The past 8 months had been a whirlwind of construction, planning, and personal growth. Emma had discovered she was a natural leader, coordinating teams of contractors, educators, and community volunteers with an efficiency that surprised everyone, including herself. She had given presentations to school boards, spoken at cultural preservation conferences, and been featured in museum industry publications. More importantly, she had fallen completely in love with James Harrison, the man who saw potential where others saw problems and who had believed in her vision when she barely believed in it herself. Their relationship had developed slowly and carefully, with both of them aware that their personal connection needed to be built on equality rather than gratitude. James had insisted on legal structures that protected both Emma's position and the museum's independence, ensuring that their romantic relationship could never be used to diminish her professional achievements. I have something to show you before the ceremony starts, James said. taking her hand and leading her toward the new archive room. The space was Emma's favorite part of the renovation. With climate-controlled storage, professional digitization equipment, and a research area where scholars and community members could explore the collection. James stopped in front of a new display case she hadn't seen before. Inside was a simple wooden box, worn smooth by years of handling, alongside a faded photograph of a young boy standing in front of a museum. "This was my grandmother's sewing box," James said softly. "She kept her most precious things in it. Letters from my grandfather during the war, my baby teeth, report cards she was proud of. And this photo was taken the first time she brought me to a museum when I was 7 years old." Emma studied the photograph, seeing traces of the man she loved in the serious little boy, wearing his best clothes for a special outing. "I donated it to the museum's collection," James continued, "because this place, what we've built together, it's where my story connects to all the other stories we're preserving. It's where the past meets the present and helps shape the future." Emma felt tears prick her eyes as she understood the significance of the gesture. This wasn't just a donation. It was James making himself part of the community narrative they were working to preserve. "James, this is beautiful. But are you sure you want to give this up?" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Emma, 8 months ago I was successful but empty. I had more money than I knew what to do with, but no real connection to anything or anyone that mattered. You changed that. This museum, our work together, falling in love with you. It's given my life meaning I didn't know I was missing." Before Emma could respond, he continued, "Which brings me to something else I wanted to share with you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught as he dropped to one knee, right there in the archive room. Surrounded by the stories and artifacts of generations of families who had built lives and dreams in their neighborhood, "Emma Rodriguez, you are the most passionate, intelligent, visionary woman I have ever known. You took a struggling museum and turned it into a thriving community center. You took a lonely man and taught him what it means to be part of something bigger than himself. Will you marry me?" Emma looked down at the man who had seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself, who had supported her dreams and helped her find her voice. The ring was beautiful, but what took her breath away was the love and hope in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, of course, yes," as James slipped the ring onto her finger. Emma thought about the shy woman who had hidden against the wall at that charity gala, feeling invisible and unimportant. That woman seemed like a stranger now. An hour later, Emma stood at the podium in the museum's main hall, looking out at a crowd of faces that included not just wealthy donors and city officials, but families from the neighborhood, former students from their educational programs, elderly residents whose stories were now preserved in their archives, and fellow museum professionals who had come to see what they had accomplished. Together, her speech was confident and heartfelt, talking about the power of community, the importance of preserving ordinary people's extraordinary stories, and the magic that happens when people come together around shared culture and history. She spoke without notes, her words flowing from experience and passion rather than preparation. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but what mattered most to Emma was the pride in James's eyes and the knowledge that she was no longer the woman who had once felt invisible. As the celebration continued around them, James pulled Emma aside for a quiet moment together. "I love you," he said simply, words that still made her heart soar every time she heard them. "I love you too," Emma replied, no longer the woman who would have been afraid to say those words aloud, looking round at the transformed museum filled with engaged visitors, at the children discovering history through play, at the elderly residents sharing their stories with fascinated audiences. Emma realized that she had not only found her voice, she had found her home. She was no longer invisible. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and she was surrounded by a community that saw her, valued her, and loved her for it. The shy museum curator, who had once hidden in corners, was now a confident leader, partner, and soon-to-be wife who knew that the best transformations happen not when someone rescues you, but when someone believes in you enough to help you rescue yourself.